A woman chases the silent man because his stillness reveals discipline, power, and mystery. His silence shows he's not controlled by emotions, not desperate for attention, and values himself deeply. She feels compelled to understand him, earn him, and rise to meet his energy, because silence makes her do the chasing. Silence is one of the strongest indicators of self-control, and this is the reason it pulls a woman toward a man more powerfully than any words ever could. When a man chooses silence, it shows that he is intentional with his emotions, selective with his reactions, and disciplined in the way he carries himself. Anyone can speak out of impulse. Anyone can react out of frustration, insecurity, or fear. But it takes a different level of inner strength to stay composed when the situation invites chaos. That restraint signals to her that this man is not driven by ego, not controlled by triggers, and not swayed by temporary emotions. When a man chooses silence, he sends a message: I am in control of myself. That alone separates him from the vast majority. Women are naturally drawn to emotional stability because it represents safety. When she sees a man who doesn't lash out, doesn't panic, and doesn't rush to defend himself, she sees someone who is reliable. She sees someone who won't crumble under pressure or say something he'll regret later. Silence becomes a demonstration of maturity. He is not here to win every argument. He is here to protect his peace and only speak when it truly matters. In a world where so many people overreact, overshare, and overexplain, silence becomes rare, almost intimidating. And that intimidation is part of the attraction. She feels the strength behind his quietness. She feels the depth he carries. She becomes curious about what he is thinking, what he is feeling, and why he doesn't need validation or approval. That curiosity pulls her closer. His silence makes her pay attention. It forces her to read his energy, not just his words, and that alone creates a deeper connection than overspeaking ever could. Silence is also a form of emotional discipline. It shows a man who has learned to master himself rather than be mastered by situations. Instead of reacting to everything that tries to pull him out of character, he prioritizes control over expression. He speaks with intention, not impulse, and this is what makes his presence powerful. When a man like this finally chooses to speak, she listens because his words carry the weight of thought, not emotion. A woman also sees his silence as a sign that he doesn't fear losing her. A man who cannot stay silent is often acting from insecurity. He's afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of going unnoticed, afraid of losing connection. But a silent man isn't controlled by those fears. He trusts himself, and that trust communicates value. A man who values himself naturally becomes someone others value too. Silence, when rooted in self-control, is not about avoidance. It's about mastery. It shows he has nothing to prove and no desire to compete for attention. He is present but not pressured, engaged but not desperate. And that calm confidence is exactly what draws a woman in. She sees a man who leads with control, not chaos, with intention, not impulse. And that is the kind of man she can't help but chase. Mystery is one of the strongest forces of attraction, and when a man carries an air of mystery, it naturally pulls a woman toward him, not because he's trying to play games, but because there is something about him she can't fully grasp. In a world where most people overshare their thoughts, feelings, intentions, weaknesses, desires, and wounds, the man who stays selective with what he reveals becomes rare, and rarity is magnetic. When a man doesn't put everything about himself on display, a woman becomes curious. Curiosity is the spark that creates emotional pursuit. Mystery doesn't mean being confusing or distant. It means having depth, layers she hasn't yet uncovered. It means she can sense that there is more beneath the surface, but he won't hand it to her easily. Women are intuitive. They feel when a man operates from a deeper place. They feel when he thinks differently, observes quietly, and moves with purpose. That difference is what draws her in. She finds herself wanting to understand him, wanting to know what he values, what he fears, what motivates him. And the fact that it isn't immediately visible makes her invest more effort to discover it. Mystery also triggers something powerful in her psychology, the desire to earn access. When a man shares everything instantly, she feels no need to work for anything. But when he reveals his world slowly, intentionally, she feels compelled to prove that she is worthy of that access. She leans forward. She tries harder. She becomes more attentive. His mystery makes her feel like she still has something to win, and that creates attraction because people value what they have to earn. A mysterious man also stands out because he is not desperate for validation. He's not trying to impress her with every detail of his life. He isn't trying to convince anyone of his worth. That unbothered energy is attractive because it shows security. He is comfortable in his silence. He doesn't rush to fill every gap with words, and he doesn't need approval to feel relevant. That calm confidence is something she feels, not through his speech, but through his presence. Mystery also leaves space for imagination. When she doesn't know everything, her mind becomes engaged. She thinks about him. She wonders about him. She imagines possibilities. And anything that occupies space in her mind starts to grow in emotional significance. This is how attraction builds, not through constant communication, but through the subtle space he leaves for curiosity to grow. A man who is mysterious is not unreadable. He is simply intentional. He shares his truth with depth, not desperation. He reveals himself with timing, not pressure. And because he holds back just enough, he becomes someone she wants to learn, not someone she overlooks. Mystery creates attraction because it awakens her desire to explore, discover, and understand. It gives her a challenge, a journey, a sense of discovery that most men never offer. And in that discovery, she finds herself chasing, not because he asked her to, but because his mystery made her want to. Silence is one of the clearest signs of emotional strength, and a woman can feel it instantly. In a world where people react without thinking, argue without purpose, and speak from insecurity rather than intention, a man who can stay silent stands out. His quietness isn't weakness, it's discipline. It tells her he isn't controlled by temporary emotions or driven by impulses. He doesn't let anger, fear, or pressure dictate his behavior. That level of restraint reveals a man who has mastered himself, and emotional mastery is deeply attractive. When a man shows emotional strength through silence, it communicates stability. She sees someone who doesn't fall apart when something goes wrong. He doesn't panic when a situation becomes overwhelming. He doesn't lash out when someone tries to provoke him. Instead, he observes, listens, and processes. That ability to remain centered makes her feel safe in his presence. She knows he won't create chaos. He will steady it. She knows he won't escalate tension. He will dissolve it. Silence becomes his way of showing that he is grounded, unshakable, and clear-minded. Not reacting emotionally also tells her that he is not dependent on validation. A man who needs constant reassurance will talk excessively, explain himself unnecessarily, or argue just to feel understood. But the man with emotional strength doesn't need to prove anything. He doesn't need to justify himself every time there is conflict. He trusts his intentions, his decisions, and his values. His silence says, I don't need to win this moment. That quiet confidence is something she feels on a deep level. Silence becomes even more powerful in moments that would make most people lose control. When things get heated, when someone disrespects him, or when emotions run high, he chooses composure instead of chaos. This shows her that he isn't easily provoked. It shows that he has emotional boundaries. It shows that he doesn't let others pull him out of his character. She sees a man who protects his energy instead of wasting it, and a woman respects a man who guards his peace more than he guards his pride. A man who uses silence wisely is also a man who listens. He doesn't speak over her, doesn't rush to defend himself, and doesn't make everything about him. He pays attention to the emotional tone behind words. He understands before responding. That emotional maturity is rare. It makes her feel valued, understood, and emotionally safe. And emotional safety is something women chase more than anything else. Another reason his silence shows emotional strength is because it proves he is not reactive. He is responsive. He waits until he understands the situation. He waits until the right moment. He waits until he can speak with clarity rather than emotion. That patience is attractive because it reveals mental discipline. His silence isn't about pulling away or hiding. It's about strength, stability, and control. When a woman sees this kind of emotional power, she feels drawn toward it. She knows she can trust it, lean on it, and respect it. And that is why silence, when rooted in emotional strength, makes her chase him even more. Non-reactivity is one of the purest forms of power a man can possess. It shows a level of inner control that most people never achieve. When a man refuses to be pulled into emotional turbulence, whether it's anger, manipulation, disrespect, or pressure, he communicates something without saying a word. I belong to myself. That alone is magnetic. A woman instantly feels the difference between a man who reacts out of insecurity and a man who responds from strength. The reactive man is driven by fear, ego, and impulsive emotion. The non-reactive man is driven by intention, clarity, and self-respect. When he is non-reactive, he is not cold or detached. He's simply unmoved by anything designed to shake him. He doesn't get triggered by attitude, silence, disagreement, or emotional outbursts. This stability forces every person around him to adjust to his energy rather than dragging him into theirs. A woman feels this deeply. She senses that he is not easily manipulated, not emotionally fragile, and not someone whose mood can be controlled. That's the kind of man she knows she cannot play games with. Instead, she rises to meet him. Non-reactivity also shows that he understands timing. Most people react instantly because they feel uncomfortable with emotional tension. But a man who can sit with that tension without exploding, chasing, arguing, or over-explaining shows incredible emotional maturity. He allows moments to breathe. He gives situations the space to reveal themselves, and in that silence, he gains clarity. She sees that he doesn't need to rush. He doesn't need to panic. He doesn't need to defend himself to feel in control. That calmness communicates power more loudly than any reaction ever could. A man who is non-reactive also protects his dignity. Reactivity often leads to regrettable words, desperate behavior, or emotional overexposure. But when he stays centered, he keeps his value intact. He doesn't let someone else dictate his tone, pace, or thinking. His emotional boundaries stay firm. When he walks away or stays silent, it's from strength, not avoidance, and that strength pulls her toward him even more. She knows he is not a man she can break. She knows he is not a man she can manipulate. She knows he is not a man who will betray himself just to keep the peace. Non-reactivity is also attractive because it reveals independence. A man who doesn't crumble under pressure is a man who doesn't need approval to feel whole. He doesn't fear losing someone, being misunderstood, or sitting in discomfort. This fearlessness shows her that his world does not revolve around emotional validation. He is secure within himself. He responds only when necessary and speaks only when it matters. That level of restraint is extremely rare, and rare things captivate people. Most importantly, a non-reactive man brings emotional safety. She knows she can bring him her storms and he won't add to the chaos. He creates a space of calm, not conflict. His presence alone stabilizes the environment, and a woman will always gravitate toward the man who remains unmoved, unshaken, and unbothered. Space is one of the most underestimated yet powerful forces in attraction. When a man gives space, not as a tactic, but as a natural expression of self-respect, something shifts in a woman's mind and emotions. She begins to invest more. She begins to think more. She begins to feel more. Why? Because space activates curiosity, reflection, and effort. When he doesn't hover, chase, overwhelm, or suffocate the connection, she feels the weight of her own desire rising. She has room to miss him, and missing him is what makes her move toward him. A man who gives space shows that he is not desperate for attention. He is not demanding reassurance or begging for emotional closeness. He isn't trying to force anything. That lack of pressure lets her breathe. Most men suffocate the connection by being too available, too eager, too present. But when a man naturally maintains his own life, priorities, and boundaries, it creates contrast. She notices the difference between him and every man who tried too hard. Instead of running from his energy, she finds herself drawn into it. Space also shows that he trusts the connection. A man who panics when things get quiet reveals insecurity. He fears losing her. He fears being forgotten. But the man who allows space shows confidence. He believes that what's meant for him will stay, not because he controls it, but because it chooses him. That confidence is magnetic. It makes her feel that he values himself. It makes her realize that he will not chase love, he will attract it. And because he isn't clinging, she starts to reach out more on her own. Space creates emotional contrast. When she doesn't hear from him constantly, every interaction feels more meaningful. Every conversation carries weight. Every moment shared feels intentional rather than routine. This contrast is what deepens her investment. The absence makes the presence more valuable. When he steps back slightly, she steps forward naturally, without force, without games, without pressure. It becomes her own desire pushing her toward him. Space also gives her time to reflect on her feelings. When a man is always there, she doesn't have to think. She doesn't have to examine her emotions. She doesn't have to miss him. But when he pulls back into his own world, her mind starts to wander. She thinks about his energy, his presence, his silence. She starts to value what he brings into her life. She starts to ask herself why his absence feels louder than another man's presence. That reflection creates emotional investment. A man who gives space also signals emotional maturity. He's not trying to control the dynamic. He's not trying to rush the connection. He's not trying to fill every silence with action. He understands that real attraction grows in the gaps, not the constant closeness. He knows that space is where longing is born, and longing is what makes her chase. She invests more because she feels the pull, not the push. She steps forward because she chooses to, not because she was pressured. The space he creates becomes the space where her desire grows. His silence is not emptiness, It is protection. It is the way he preserves his value in a world where people reveal too much, too quickly to anyone who asks. A man who understands the power of silence knows that not everyone deserves access to his inner world. Not everyone earns the right to hear his thoughts, his vulnerabilities, his plans, or his emotions. By choosing silence, he controls who gets to know him and who doesn't. That alone elevates his worth. When he doesn't hand out pieces of himself freely, a woman sees that he is a man who values his energy, his time, and his peace. His silence also shows that he refuses to explain himself unnecessarily. Most people talk to be understood, validated, or accepted, but when he stays silent, it shows he isn't trying to convince anyone of his intentions or worth. He doesn't need external approval to confirm what he already knows internally. And that kind of confidence is rare. His silence becomes a filter. It separates those who appreciate him from those who only want to pull something out of him. She sees that he is not easily accessed, not easily influenced, and not easily swayed. That makes him stand out. Silence protects his value because it shields him from emotional manipulation. Not reacting, not oversharing, and not exposing his every thought prevents others from using his vulnerabilities against him. It's not that he doesn't feel deeply. It's that he knows when, where, and with whom to express those feelings. A woman realizes quickly that he cannot be guilt-tripped, provoked, or emotionally controlled. His silence becomes a boundary that protects his peace and reinforces his inner strength. His silence also keeps him unpredictable in the best way. When a man speaks too much, he becomes transparent. When he reveals too quickly, he becomes easy to read. But when he stays silent and selective, he maintains mystery, and mystery enhances value. She wants to know more. She wants to dig deeper. She wants to understand him. And because he doesn't offer everything up front, she naturally invests more effort into the connection. Effort grows attachment, and attachment increases desire. A man's silence also makes his presence louder. When he speaks less, everything he does say becomes more powerful. Every word carries weight. Every opinion feels intentional. Every expression feels meaningful. She pays attention because he doesn't flood her with noise. He offers quality, not quantity. He offers depth, not constant communication. His silence makes his words rare, and rare things always carry more value. Silence also protects him from emotional burnout. By choosing when to engage, he ensures he never gives more than he truly wants to. He guards his focus, his attention, and his emotional energy. He doesn't exhaust himself trying to please or perform. This self-preservation signals to her that he is a man who takes himself seriously, a man who knows his worth, honors it, and refuses to compromise it. His silence is not distance. It is dignity. It is the shield that keeps him grounded, respected, and desired. By protecting his value, his silence becomes the very thing that makes her chase him. Stillness is one of the clearest signs of maturity because it shows a man is not ruled by impulse, ego, or chaos. When he can remain calm while the world around him becomes loud, emotional, or unstable, it reveals a depth that most people never develop. Stillness means he has learned to think before he speaks, process before he reacts, and understand before he responds. It shows growth, discipline, and emotional intelligence. A woman can feel this instantly. She sees that his stillness isn't emptiness, it's wisdom. It's the quiet strength of someone who has lived, learned, and evolved. A mature man doesn't jump into unnecessary arguments. He doesn't chase every emotional wave or escalate every conflict. He doesn't need to prove a point just to satisfy his ego. Instead, he remains grounded, focused, and composed. His stillness sends a message. He knows what deserves his energy and what doesn't. He isn't here to fight battles that do not matter or to entertain drama that steals his peace. This level of emotional restraint makes him stand out. A woman notices that he doesn't respond like everyone else, and that contrast makes him more appealing. Stillness also shows that he has control over his emotions. Immature men react instantly because they fear losing control. But a mature man understands that control is not found in force. It is found in presence. He listens, observes, and analyzes before he speaks. His quietness is grounded, intentional, and stable. This gives him the ability to make clearer decisions and avoid mistakes driven by momentary emotion. A woman respects this deeply because it makes her feel safe. She knows he won't lose himself in anger, insecurity, or pressure. She knows she can trust his judgment because it isn't reactive, it's thoughtful. His stillness also reveals patience. Patience is a sign of emotional evolution. It shows that he doesn't let impatience or discomfort guide him. He waits for the right moment. He allows things to unfold. He gives people the space to express themselves without rushing to interrupt or defend. This patience shows humility and strength. He isn't afraid of silence. He isn't afraid of slow progress. A woman senses that he is not living from fear or scarcity. He trusts himself, his path, and the timing of life. A still man also carries a certain emotional depth. He has learned through experiences that wisdom grows in quiet moments, not in noise. His stillness reflects a man who has reflected on himself, his flaws, patterns, and strengths. He knows who he is and who he refuses to be. That self-awareness is incredibly attractive because it shows he is not operating on autopilot. He is intentional. He is self-guided. He is emotionally grown. Stillness also reveals discipline. It takes discipline to remain composed when provoked, to remain patient when frustrated, and to remain grounded when challenged. A woman admires this because it shows he has mastered himself enough to handle life without collapsing or overreacting. His maturity is felt, not spoken. His silence carries more weight than another man's loudness. A man whose stillness reflects his maturity becomes someone she respects, trusts, and gravitates toward, because his calmness is the kind of strength she knows she can rely on. His silence has a powerful psychological impact on her because it creates a mirror she cannot avoid. When a man doesn't react, doesn't argue, and doesn't rush to fix or explain, she is left alone with her own thoughts, emotions, and behavior. And in that quiet space, something profound happens. She begins to self-reflect. His silence forces her to look inward rather than outward. Instead of focusing on his reaction, she starts examining her own actions, her tone, her intentions, and her patterns. This is why his silence feels so intense. It makes her confront things she would normally ignore. When a man reacts instantly, he becomes the distraction. She can shift the blame, twist the situation, or focus on his emotions instead of her own. But when he stays silent and grounded, there's nowhere for her to run emotionally. She becomes aware of how she speaks, how she behaves, and how she treats him. His silence holds up a mirror that shows her what needs improvement, not through criticism, but through contrast. She sees her emotional impulses next to his calm. She sees her reactivity next to his poise. She sees her chaos next to his stability. That contrast forces her to question herself. Silence also gives her space to process what she truly feels. Many women use sudden emotion, fear, frustration, insecurity to push a man, test him, or provoke a reaction. But when he doesn't respond the way she expects, it breaks the pattern. She can't feed off his energy. She can't escalate the moment. She can't pull him into emotional turbulence. Instead, she has to sit with her own emotions. She begins to ask herself, why did I react this way? What am I actually feeling? What do I really want from him? These questions don't arise when everything is loud. They arise in silence. His silence also teaches her that he won't reward toxic behavior. If she tries to provoke him and he stays composed, she realizes that emotional manipulation won't work on him. That realization pushes her to change the way she communicates. She adjusts, softens, and becomes more intentional because she knows he won't respond to negativity, drama, or pressure. She starts to elevate her behavior to match his. Without ever saying a word, he sets a standard, and she rises to it because she respects him. Over time, his silence makes her recognize where she may have been unfair, impatient, or emotionally impulsive. She may feel guilt, understanding, or clarity, feelings that drive genuine change. She begins to value his stability even more. She sees him not as someone who avoids conflict, but as someone who refuses to lose himself in it. That realization deepens her respect for him and increases her desire to communicate better. Most importantly, his silence reminds her that he is not afraid of losing her. He's not chasing validation. He's not begging for attention. He's not trying to win emotional battles. That confidence forces her to evaluate her own value, effort, and intentions. She starts asking herself, am I meeting him where he is? Am I treating him the way he deserves? Am I giving what I expect in return? His silence doesn't just make her think, it makes her grow. It brings self-awareness, emotional clarity, and accountability. And because she evolves through his stillness, she becomes more invested in him. His silence becomes the catalyst for her transformation, and that transformation makes her chase him even more. In the end, a man's silence is not distance, confusion, or indifference. It is power. Every aspect of his quiet strength draws her in. His self-control, his mystery, his emotional stability, his non-reactivity, his ability to give space, his protection of his value, his calm maturity, and the way his silence makes her self-reflect all create a gravitational pull she cannot deny. He becomes the man she must understand, the man she must earn, the man she must rise to meet. She chases not because he withholds, but because he embodies a level of inner strength that inspires respect, curiosity, and deeper effort. His silence becomes the loudest statement he will ever make, and the reason she moves closer, not further away.